Hi, my name is Kathleen Hamilton, and I am the illustrator of Terralepus and the book series. And today I'll be talking about Terralepus, Falling Star, and I'm going to give you a summary and read a chapter out of the book. And this book is illustrated by Christine Hamilton. All right. Estella closed her eyes and raised her head. She stood there, immersed in the pleasure of feeling the wind. She opened her eyes and gently smiled, something she hadn't done in a while. Estella walked over toward the lake and watched as the wind gently tossed a few fallen leaves around. She placed her fingers through the laced metal fence and stood there, watching the water shimmer in the moonlight. It was beautiful. A figure silently watched Estella as she stood there. Eyes wide, he breathed hard as he watched her tattered dress move with the wind. He sat still on the grass, hidden near the tree, as he continued to watch Estella slowly walk away. He leaned forward and slowly followed her. He stopped when she did. Estella pulled her hair back, and the figure inhaled sharply. Estella turned toward the sound. They both stood still, listening and waiting. Finally, Estella, still listening carefully, looked up at the moon. "Oh, Lumen, if you can hear me, know that I still love you." She turned her head slightly to listen. When she heard nothing, she sighed and slowly headed back to the building. "Oh, my falling star," groaned a voice. Estella quickly turned and stared at the figure that was standing there. She walked over, her heart beating faster, her paws starting to sweat. She drew close and gasped as they stared at each other. "I have died and gone to heaven," he exclaimed. "I must have." All right. So, a spaceship crash lands in Bangorman, and Jasmine and Roger go to investigate. There they find three hedgehogs, Estella, Luna, and Orion. And as a mysterious force takes control over the Duncan heroes, Jackie insists on keeping the Zorion stones until she can determine what is going on. Lilly becomes the attention of Orion, to the chagrin of Cupid, who lets Orion know how he feels. Dolores and her friends discuss the upcoming wedding of the year as she discovers that her son is getting married to Cora, and she pulls out all stops to prevent them from being together. This is chapter 10. Dolores stepped into her car and adjusted her seatbelt. Greg seemed busy since school started, and he hadn't mentioned anything about Bethany for almost 2 weeks. Well, she thought, he didn't volunteer anything usually, but lately he had shrugged off the mention of Bethany any time she had brought it up. Dolores backed out of her driveway. "I'll just go for a little ride, that's all," she thought. She headed down the road and soon turned onto Small Victory Road. Dolores slowed down when she saw the Duncan house. The driveway was full of cars, but she did not see Greg's truck. She looked as she drove by, but didn't really see anything worthy. She continued on for a while until she saw the Johnson house. Dolores never knew where his girlfriend lived exactly, but she had looked up the address and now she knew where she lived. She slowly drove by and noticed a green car in her driveway, along with another car and van. Dolores headed down the road and turned around, intending to go back home. As she drove back, she glanced over and saw Thomas walking out to his car, followed by Bethany. Dolores did a double take. There was no doubt that it was Bethany, but the young man, she thought, looked like Max Duncan. She put her foot out on the brake as she saw Bethany pin Thomas up against the car and kiss him. Dolores stared for a moment before starting to ease away. Bethany looked over as she saw something move in the corner of her eyes. "Oh no," she moaned. "What?" said Thomas, turning to look at what Bethany was staring at. Thomas watched as Dolores' car sped away. Oh, tell me that wasn't Dolores, said Thomas. That was Dolores, said Bethany in a frantic whisper. What do we do? We better warn Greg, said Thomas. Get in. Bethany and Thomas got into his car and headed down the road. Thomas slowed down at his house. She's not here. I guess she headed up the road. They watched as their grandmother pulled into the driveway. Thomas got out of his car and walked over to his grandmother's car. He opened the door and looked at Greg. Hurry up and get inside the house. We need to talk. Thomas glanced up at the road to make sure Dolores wasn't coming back. Greg and Cora stepped out quickly and walked in, followed by everyone else. We had a problem a few minutes ago, started Thomas. Bethany and I were outside of her house, and your mother drove by. Greg stared at Thomas. She saw us kissing and sped off, said Bethany. She knows now that I'm not with you and that I'm with Thomas. Greg paused. Well, all she knows is that we might have broken up, or we just stayed friends. As long as she doesn't know about me being here, I think I'm still okay. Thomas breathed a sigh of relief. I hope so, he said. I really don't want to see you have problems. I'm not going to let Mom be my problem, said Greg. I'm going to marry Cora and have a wonderful life. He put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her in. And you will have a wonderful life, Greg, said Melissa. She's a sweet girl and she'll be good to you. Melissa and Doug hugged everyone and said goodbye. Cora and Greg headed upstairs. Cora opened Lily's door. Hey, she said to Lilly. Hey, Cora, she replied back. Cupid looked up from his book and smiled at Cora and Greg. Want to be my bridesmaid? Asked Cora. Yes, replied Lilly. She paused, touching her head. Oh, Lilly, it will grow back, said Cora. Don't you worry about a thing. Cupid, would you be my groomsman? Yes, Cora, said Cupid. I'd be honored. Cora grinned and pulled Greg out of Lily's room. She sure is excited, said Cupid. She should be, said Lilly. She's known Greg for almost 8 years. Lilly looked back down at her paper. Cupid watched her for a moment before turning back to his book. He knew he would have to wait a few more years before asking Lilly to marry him, as they were still young. But he knew in his heart that he fell in love with her soul. He almost envied Cora and Greg. Their time had come where they were ready to move on with their lives. Lilly leaned on Cupid and grabbed another paper. Cupid put his arm around her shoulders and looked into his best friend's eyes as she looked up at him. She smiled, and he felt as though his heart had melted. They quietly laughed at each other before they turned back to their work. Jackie stuck her head out of the kitchen and looked up towards the stairs. Dinner time, she called. Sam and Daisy looked over the railing and headed down the stairs, followed by Thomas and Bethany. Trixie, Alex, Timothy, Cassandra, Cora, and Greg joined them at the table. Jackie looked back up the stairs. Lilly stood there hesitating. Cupid put his arm through hers and led her downstairs. They joined everyone at the table. As they ate, Jackie spoke up. Tomorrow, I need everyone to come to the Aeronautical Space and Exploration Center. The asteroid is closer now, and we need to redirect it before it gets too close to our gravitational pull. The stones are locked up in a cabinet at work, but they're hitting the cabinet and sending it up into the ceiling with violent force. The next occurrence will happen around 6 p.m., and after that you can wear the stone to use for redirecting the asteroid. Everyone stared at Jackie. Mom, what if we get sucked into this thing because of the magnetism? Asked Trixie. Once it's turned, you should be on the other side of it. You should have enough time to move the asteroid away. One by one, her children nodded, all except Lilly. She sat there, wide-eyed, with her fork in her paw, staring at her mother. Lilly, asked Jackie, are you all right? Lilly continued to stare. Cupid leaned over and whispered into her ear. You are stronger than you think, and smarter than you let on. You can beat this monster. Lilly shut her mouth and turned to look at Cupid. He sat there, calmly eating his food. She set her fork down and took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. We can do this, she said. She watched as her brothers and sisters smiled back in agreement. Then That's my beautiful girl, thought Cupid, as he watched her pick up her fork and start to eat again. After dinner was over, Cupid grabbed Lily's paw and walked outside with her. He picked her up as she wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight. "Relax, Lily," he said to her. "You'll be fine." Lily looked into his eyes as he flew up. He flew over a few houses and glided over a pond. The sun was setting, so Lily could see the long dark shadows of buildings on the ground. She hugged Cupid, running her fingers of one paw through the back of his hair. Ironic, she thought, his hair is longer than mine. Cupid glided down into the yard of her house. "Guess we should go finish our work," he said to Lily. She still had her arms wrapped around him. He grabbed her arms and pulled them down, only for her to throw them around his neck once more. "We're not going to get finished, Lily," he said with a soft smile. She kissed him and he chuckled. They stood underneath the oak tree for a few moments, embraced in a kiss. "Oh, honey, come on." He put his arm round her shoulders and led her back inside the house. Moments later, Cora peeked out the front door. "All clear," she called back to Greg. Greg headed out the back door and into his truck. He drove around the house and into the road. Greg waved goodbye to Cora and sighed. He drove to his house and parked his truck. He stepped out and headed towards the front door, anticipating something from his mother. As he walked in, he saw his mother and father sitting down watching the television. "Greg," called his mother, "are you doing okay?" "Yes, Mom," he replied. "How are things with you and Bethany?" Greg shrugged. "Are you still dating her?" "No," replied Greg, "we're just friends now." "Oh," she replied, "so where have you been?" "I've been hanging out in quiet places so I can get my homework done, Mom," he replied. "I have to do well this year so I can go to college." "Speaking of college, there are some college applications on the table next to your mail." "Thanks, Mom," said Greg. He headed into the kitchen and looked at the mail. 3 envelopes were from different colleges, sending Greg an open invitation to come and visit. He looked at the applications on the table. His mom had sent away for those, 5 different applications. Greg gathered them all up and took them upstairs. There, he thumbed through them before setting the pile on his desk. "I'll take them with me tomorrow," he thought. He didn't want them, but he couldn't throw them out at his house, as his mother would take immediate notice and become suspicious that he might try to go to the Honeyville University. Greg got dressed in his pajamas and grabbed his cell phone. He locked his door and stepped into a corner of his room. He dialed Cora's number. "Hello?" "Hi, how are you?" "I'm fine, honey." "I miss you already." Greg smiled as he listened to Cora talk. After a few minutes, he got off the phone. He lay down on his bed, staring around his room. He knew he was going to move out at the end of the year. Hopefully, he wouldn't have too much of a problem from his parents. The next morning, Lilly hit her alarm. She looked up at the time, 6 a.m. Lilly sat up on the edge of her bed and thought to herself. She was going back to school. She had stayed up late last night, finishing her makeup work after Cupid had left. Lilly wasn't looking forward to going back. Her image had changed, and her mother had to drive her to school. Everyone would think she was weird without her hair. How would they react? What would they say? Lilly closed her eyes for a moment before standing up and shuffling to the bathroom. Cupid seemed to be a little more attentive with her, and her baldness didn't cause him to shy away. He had told her that he loved her. She was amazed at his sincerity. Lilly looked at herself in the mirror. She stared for a moment before she washed her paws and face. She came out of the bathroom as Trixie went in. She passed Thomas and Sam, who both pat her on the shoulder. "Lilly," said Sam. Lilly turned around. "Glad you're still with us." He hugged his sister before turning and heading down the stairs. After Lilly got dressed, she headed downstairs into the dining room. She stopped when she heard the doorbell. "I'll get it," she called. She opened the door to see Cupid. "You're early." I am, he replied. He stepped inside and closed the door. Since your mom has to take you to school, I thought I'd stop by before school and see you. Lilly happily embraced Cupid. Soon it was time for everyone to head on. Cupid waved goodbye to Lilly as she stepped into her mother's van. As Jackie pulled up to the school, she looked back at Lilly. Everything is going to be okay, Lilly. Lilly looked at her mother and smiled. Yes, Mom. She stepped out and headed toward the front door. As she walked in and headed to her locker, Daisy joined her. I'm so glad you're back, she said, giving Lilly a hug. Thanks, Daisy, replied Lilly. She looked over Daisy's shoulder and saw some of the children looking at her as they passed by. Her cheeks started to flush. Lilly pulled her books out of the locker and shut the door. They headed to their first class. They both sat down and Lilly looked around. Some of her classmates stared, some just looked at her, and then back to what they were doing. Mrs. Howell walked into the classroom. Good morning, class. Glad to have you back, Miss Duncan. How are you feeling? Good, she said softly. Mrs. Howell nodded. Okay, class, open your book to page 21. Lilly flipped to open the book and looked at it. She looked up at the teacher and tried to listen attentively. Her mind would wander from time to time, worrying about what others thought of her. But nobody was paying attention anymore. She finally calmed down. During physical education, Mrs. Hudson walked up to Lilly. Lilly, do you feel up to running a few laps? I believe so, she replied. Good, said Mrs. Hudson with a smile. I'm glad you're back. Your mother told me what happened. She gave Lilly a pat on the back before turning back to some of the other students. Lilly jogged around the track slowly. She wanted to pace herself and not push too hard yet. She caught up to Trevor Perkins. Hi, Lilly, he said. Nice buzz. Lilly looked at him funny. Are you making fun of me? No, he replied, surprised. It's just neat, that's all. I feel really weird without my hair. I wish my mom would let me buzz mine, replied Trevor, but she likes me with some hair. Trevor paused. Lilly, you still look nice with no hair. Thank you, she replied. I mean it, he said, as he started to huff. You have a nice face, you're very pretty, so don't be too hard on yourself. Lilly looked at Trevor and smiled. Thank you, Trevor, that means a lot. They both stopped to catch their breath. Let's go outside and play soccer, called Mrs. Hudson. The class followed her outside. By the end of the day, Lilly felt a bit more confident. The kids may have stared at her at first, but then they went on with their business. Lilly waited for her mom to pick her up. When she got into the car, Jackie turned and looked at her. How were you at school? Things went better than I thought, Lilly replied. Great, replied Jackie. She drove back to the Aeronautical Space and Exploration Center. Cora, Trixie, and Sam were waiting for their mother in one car. Thomas and Bethany sat in his car. Alex and Greg pulled up in their trucks. Adam hung his head out the window. He looked back at his older brother. Hey, he said suddenly, are you going to be okay? Alex had covered his mouth with one paw and was intently staring out the window at the spaceship that was being prepared. He looked at Adam. I don't know. This whole thing with her going into space makes me ill. Dude, you know she's going to be an astronaut, said Adam. I know, replied Alex. I guess the reality is sinking in. You know you have to handle this, Alex, or your relationship with Trixie isn't going to work. Alex sighed. I know. You're right. Cupid flew down and walked over to the group as they were gathering on the sidewalk. They headed inside and went to one of the training rooms. We still have 2 hours to go, said Jackie, so now's the time to get something to eat and do any homework you may have. Trixie jumped up and grabbed Alex's paw. Let's go, Alex, she said with a smile. Adam trailed behind them. What's it like floating in space, Trixie? Asked Adam. Do the stars look brighter? How does our planet look when you look back on it? I wish I could go. Trixie smiled at Adam as he pummeled her with questions. Poor Alex hung onto her paw, silently following her. All the teens met in the cafeteria and grabbed something to eat. As they paid for their food, Lilly looked over to see the two hedgehog teens sitting at a table. Orion appeared to be staring at her. Lilly paid for her food and followed the rest of the teens to another table. She sat down next to Cupid and started to eat. Orion continued to stare, and his sister Luna poked him in the side. "What are you staring at, Orion?" she asked. "That beautiful girl," he replied, not taking his eyes off of Lilly. Luna looked over at the other table. "Which beautiful girl?" "The one with no hair," he replied. "Isn't she beautiful?" Luna looked at Lilly. "Yes, I guess so." "I'm going to go talk to her," he said, standing up. Luna pulled him down. "Why?" "Why not, Luna?" he replied. "I have never talked to a girl except for you. I just want to." He stood up and walked over as Luna watched. Orion stopped at the edge of the table and looked at Lilly. "Hi," he said, raising his paw. "Hi," replied Lilly, looking up. Orion stood there for a moment before he spoke again. "You are beautiful," he said. The teen stopped and looked at him while Lilly placed her paw on her cheek and blushed. "Thank you," she replied. Orion stood there for another moment. "Do you live here?" he asked. "I live down the road a ways," replied Lilly. Orion nodded his head. He stood there for a moment. "I have to go now." He turned and headed back to his table. "I didn't catch your name," called Lilly. He stopped and turned around. "Orion," he said. "It was good to meet you, Orion," replied Lilly. Orion sat down at his table and stared at his food before finally taking a bite. "Not bad, brother," replied Luna. "Maybe I'll try to talk to the bird." Luna stood up and walked over to the group. She walked over and stood next to Cupid. "You're an interesting specimen." Cupid looked up at Luna. "Specimen? I'm not dead yet." Lilly looked over at Cupid. "You are interesting," she said with a grin. "Your life form is interesting," replied Luna. "You look like everyone here, but you have wings." "Okay," said Cupid, smiling at Luna. "I guess I am interesting." Cupid extended his paw to Luna. "My name is Cupid. What's your name?" "My name is Luna. I am Orion's sister." "It is wonderful to meet you, Luna," said Cupid. Luna nodded before turning back to her table. "I did it," whispered Luna to Orion. "I talked to the bird boy, but I'm not sure if he's much of a bird." Orion nodded. He looked back at Lilly as he ate. Luna stared at her brother. "Oh, you cannot be serious, brother," said Luna. "She's out of your league." Orion turned and looked at his sister. "What? Just looking." "Orion," started Luna. "Look, Luna," said Orion. "I'm 15 years old. I have no friends, and we will probably live the rest of our lives out on this planet. You and we might meet someone here. Sure, they are not the same species, but many of them are nice and they live in peace. I mean, did you see that fox and cat? Normally, the cat would have been his dinner, but he is married to her. Now that is two different species. Luna, if it can work for them, it can work for us." Luna stared at her brother. "I'm only 13. I really don't care about the other species. I'll talk to them and maybe make some friends, but I'm always going to feel different and be different. We're refugees, Orion, and we're lucky that this planet accepted us with open arms. I can't say that for all the other planets." Orion watched as the group of teenagers stood up and headed toward the kitchen. As they headed out the door, Orion stood up. "Where are you going?" asked Luna. "I'm going to see what they are doing," replied Orion. He took his tray to the kitchen and hurried out the door. Luna sighed. Orion peeked into the training room and watched as some of the teens pulled out their books and some of them sat there and talked. He noticed Lilly reading one of her books while Cupid was talking with Trixie. He walked over and sat down. "What are you doing?" Lilly looked up. "I'm catching up on my studying," she replied. She turned the cover of the book towards Orion. "History," she said. "It has its boring moments." Orion nodded. "So you go to school?" he asked. "Yes," replied Lilly. "Our mom taught us everything she knew," said Orion. "Back on our planet, women were not allowed to be educated. They might think for themselves. But Mom was smart, and her parents taught her how to read and write. They said she needed to be free in her heart and mind. Wow, said Lilly. We're blessed to be able to get an education then. Do you think my sister and I could go to school? He asked. Talk to my mom, replied Lilly. She would know more about signing you and your sister up. At that moment, Jackie stood at the door. All right, kids, let's get ready. Cora, Thomas, Trixie, Sam, and Lilly stood up and followed their mother out the door. Alex jumped up and started to pace. Adam jumped up and stood next to him. Keep it together, man. I need some fresh air, muttered Alex. He headed out the door with Adam trailing behind. Wow, poor guy, muttered Greg to Bethany and Cupid. The Duncan teens put on their spacesuits. Sergeant Leopold joined them. He was a red fox who used to live on the planet Zorion. The six of them followed Jackie into the laboratory where the cabinet held the stones. They stood there waiting as Jackie looked at her watch. 6 o'clock. A moment later, the cabinet suddenly rose and slammed into the cracked ceiling. The chain reinforcements on the bottom of the cabinet strained as they were bolted into the floor. They watched as the beams cracked and pieces of the ceiling fell to the floor. One of the bolts popped out of the floor and smacked the bottom of the cabinet. Lilly jumped as she watched the chain. The intensity of the scene before her made a sense of panic rise within her. She knew she could wear the pendant, but she was terrified. The stone had practically taken her life, and yet somehow she had to trust herself with it once again. The cabinet slowly eased down out of the ceiling and fell to the floor. Jackie walked over to it and put her key in the lock. She opened the doors and grabbed the pendants. She passed them out and watched as Cora, Sergeant Leopold, Thomas, Sam, and Trixie placed theirs around their necks. Lilly stood there looking at her pendant as the others headed out the door. Cupid peeked in and looked at Lilly. He walked over to her and took the necklace from her and placed it around her neck. You can do this, Lilly. Don't be afraid. He kissed her, then walked her out the door. Outside, Cupid watched as Lilly pressed a button and the helmet clicked shut. She headed over to the spaceship with the rest of her siblings and Sergeant Leopold. Greg, Bethany, Alex, and Adam joined Cupid to watch. Orion stepped up behind them and watched as the engines roared to life and the spaceship flew up at a vertical angle. Inside the spaceship, Captain Jasmine and Captain Forrester were flying the ship. They saw the asteroid as they flew closer to it. It was still far away when Jasmine slowed the engines down. Stay on the left side of the asteroid, said Jasmine. It needs to turn at a 60-degree angle to avoid our planet. That's a tall order, replied Sergeant Leopold. Captain Forrester walked to the back of the ship and led the six into a decompression room. Ready? He asked. The six nodded. He shut the door and the room decompressed. The doors to the outside slowly opened and the group turned on their jetpacks and flew outside. There, looming in the distance, was the asteroid. Its irregularly shaped body slowly rotated as the group drew closer to it. That's close enough, said Sergeant Leopold into his microphone. The teens stopped and spread out. They looked over at Lilly, who was focused intently on the asteroid. They pulled their right arms back, rotating them and thrusting them forward. The asteroid slightly moved. Sorry. They continued to atomically manipulate the asteroid as they watched it slowly move in the direction they wanted it to. Lilly, said Cora into her microphone. We need to heat this thing up. Why? Asked Lilly. At 60 degrees, the asteroid can safely pass our planet, but it will still be magnetic. I think we need to heat it up and cause it to lose its magnetism. We need to get it to the Curie temperature. How are we going to measure the temperature? Asked Lilly. Don't worry, replied Cora. The energy from the sun is more than hot enough to do the job. The rest of you keep doing what you are doing. Lilly and Cora moved their arms towards the sun, and they watched as the energy quickly flowed towards them. They both pointed at the advancing asteroid and watched as it slowly heated up and turned red. It's getting ridiculously hot, said Thomas. Hold on, replied Cora. Lilly and Cora heated up for a few more moments and watched as the stone seemed to melt. They stopped, and Lilly and Cora joined the others in manipulating the asteroid until Jackie spoke into their earpieces. It's angled at 60 degrees, she said. Come back. Sam put his thumb up, and Lilly smiled at him. She felt good about what she did and became more comfortable with her pendant. The group of them headed back to the spaceship, and Jasmine and Forrester headed back to the Space Center. As the group stepped off of the spaceship, Lilly clicked open her helmet. She took a breath of fresh air in and smiled. She looked over at Cupid and started to float. She turned to see Trixie floating as well. Lilly flew past her sister, Trixie, who followed her back to the building. You've got to admit, said Lilly to Trixie, it feels good to have the stones back. Yes, it does, replied Trixie with a smile. She turned to see Alex run up to her and give her a hug. I'm so glad you're back, he said. I'm glad that asteroid didn't get caught up in our gravitational pull, replied Trixie. We would have been toast. Trixie paused and looked a little closer at Alex. Have you been crying? Just a little, he replied sheepishly. Why? She asked as she started to pull off her suit. Well, said Alex, rubbing his arm with his paw, I was just a little upset. Over what? You went into space and you were fooling with an asteroid that could have pulled you in and killed you, he replied. That's why we have scientists here who figure out when and where we can go, replied Trixie. We were positioned in a safe place. Alex looked down. Trixie drew closer to Alex and gave him a hug. It's okay to worry a little, but I'm not going to do anything that would jeopardize my life. Alex hugged Trixie and held on for a few minutes before he finally let go. Do you want to take me home? Asked Trixie as she grabbed his paw and started to walk out. Sure, he replied. Adam looked at the two as they walked by. Hey, wait for me, he called as he ran to catch up with him. Orion watched as Lilly left the building with the others. He walked over to her. Hi, Lilly, he said. Hello, Orion, replied Lilly. I like your necklace, he said as he studied her face. Thank you. I do too, she replied. Do you like flying in space? Yes, replied Lilly. It's amazing. I think walking on your planet is amazing, replied Orion, and it smells good. Lilly stopped and watched as the rest of her family left. Cupid stopped and waited next to her. Sometimes it stinks, Orion. How so? Garbage, bathroom smells, things like that. Orion smiled. Will you be back tomorrow? I wasn't planning on it, she replied. Come back tomorrow, he said. I would like to see you again. Lilly looked back at him and floated up into the sky. Cupid looked at Orion before flapping his wings and catching up to Lilly. Luna walked up to her brother as he watched them fly off. Well, do you have a friend or not? She's nice, replied Orion. I think that bird boy belongs to her, said Luna. I do not think she owns him. Maybe not, but he follows her around, she replied. All right. So anyway, Terralepus Falling Star can be found on Amazon.com with the rest of my books, my Terralepus series. And if you would like to look at it, it is on www.terralepus.com. All my books are there. And in addition, there's another website, www.kathleenmhamilton.com, and you can actually purchase the books through that website. Terralepus is also available on Facebook, Instagram, and of course the other YouTube videos are available as well. So anyway, take care, and I'll see you in the stars.